Have you ever wondered why some countries keep getting richer, while others seem stuck in the same struggles decade after decade? Why nations with oil, copper, farmland, forests, and millions of hard-working people still fight poverty, weak currencies, and endless debt? On the surface, it doesn't make much sense. How can a country full of valuable resources have less wealth than a country with almost none? To understand this, you have to look beyond the borders of those nations and pay attention to the global system built after World War II, a system most people never learn about, but one that quietly shapes the economic destiny of entire continents. When the war ended, much of the world lay in ruins, factories were destroyed, currencies were unstable, and governments were drowning in rebuilding costs. But one country came out stronger than ever: the United States. Its industries were untouched, its currency was trusted, and its influence was unmatched. And so a new financial order was created, full of institutions, rules, and promises of stability. It sounded like a plan to help the world rebuild, but behind the scenes, it also created a structure where powerful countries became lenders, and developing countries became long-term borrowers. At first, borrowing seemed harmless. If you were a developing nation in the 60s or 70s, you were encouraged to take loans to modernize your roads, your hospitals, your electrical grid, your entire economy. The interest rates looked manageable, the future felt bright, and the money flowed easily. Until it didn't, as global conditions shifted, interest rates rising, exports dropping, commodity prices fluctuating, countries found themselves unable to repay. And this is where everything changes. Because when a country can't pay back its debt, it doesn't get punished, it gets controlled. Help comes with conditions, and these conditions reshape the entire economy. Countries are told to cut government spending even if schools and hospitals suffer. They're told to sell state-owned companies usually bought by foreign investors. They're told to open their natural resources, oil, copper, forests, minerals, to multinational corporations. They're told to remove protections for local industries, and the most important demand of all, they're told to let their currency fall. This is where the real story begins. Because when a country's currency loses value, everyday life becomes harder instantly. Prices rise, savings evaporate, salaries fall behind inflation. But something else happens too, something far more important. The entire wealth of the country becomes cheaper to foreigners. When a currency drops by half, the price of its resources in dollars also drops by half. Oil becomes cheaper, copper becomes cheaper, farmland becomes cheaper, even people's labor becomes cheaper. A currency crash acts like a giant discount sign over an entire nation, a discount paid for by the citizens and enjoyed by foreign buyers. This isn't some rare tragedy, it's a pattern. You can see it repeating over and over again. Take Argentina. In the early 20th century, it was one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. But decades of debt cycles and forced devaluations destroyed its financial stability. Every time the peso crashes, Argentina exports its beef, its grain, its energy become cheaper for the rest of the world. Foreign companies buy more. But ordinary Argentinians lose their savings, their buying power, and their future. Or look at Zambia, a country with rich copper mines critical for electronics, construction, renewable energy, everything modern life depends on. But during a severe debt crisis, Zambia's currency collapsed, and mining rights were sold at shockingly low prices. Foreign companies made billions in profit, while Zambia remained poor, despite sitting on one of the most valuable metals on earth. And then there's Indonesia in 1997, when its currency fell more than 80%. Millions of people lost their jobs and their savings. But while the public suffered, foreign corporations quietly bought factories, plantations, and mines for almost nothing. In less than a year, entire industries changed ownership. If this were random, it might be easier to accept. But the pattern is too consistent to ignore. Debt creates pressure. Conditions force countries to weaken their own economies, Devaluation makes their wealth cheap, and foreign corporations move in at exactly the right moment. This cycle keeps developing countries dependent, while wealth flows outward, not in decades, but in days during a crash. So why doesn't the system change? Because it works. Not for everyone, of course, but it works perfectly for the countries and institutions that benefit from the cycle. A poor country is easier to influence. A weak currency makes resources cheaper. Debt ensures compliance. And when a nation tries to break free, it faces financial consequences. But behind all these numbers and policies, there are real people. Families watching prices rise every week. Workers whose salaries can't keep up with inflation. Students unable to continue school. Retired people whose savings lose value overnight. A currency crisis doesn't just hurt the economy, it destroys lives. The sad truth is that poverty in many countries isn't an accident. It isn't even always the result of corruption or bad leadership. Sometimes, it is the predictable outcome of a system designed to keep the global balance exactly as it is. But here's the part nobody expects. The system is changing. New alliances are forming. New currencies are rising. Digital money is reshaping how countries trade. And nations that once had no voice are slowly gaining leverage. The world built after World War II isn't permanent. And we're living through the moment when its cracks are becoming impossible to hide. Some countries will use this shift to break free. Others will fall deeper into the cycle. And those who understand how this system really works will have the best chance to avoid becoming the next victim of it. So why do poor countries stay poor? Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack discipline or resources, but because they've been placed in a global structure that makes escaping poverty incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive. And the more people learn about how this system works, the harder it becomes for that system to continue unchecked. Knowledge doesn't fix everything, but it's always where change begins.